What's up, everybody? Couchmills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down one tip for every single rank. So if you want to climb from bronze, silver, gold, plat, diamond, masters, grandmaster into top 500, then this is the perfect video for you. So let's waste no more time and jump right into it. Now we're going to start off with the 7th circle of hell, the bronze rank. Now the hard truth that a lot of people won't tell you is that Smurfs rarely exist in the bronze rank. The problem with Smurfs and bronze is that it's incredibly hard for a Smurf to stay in bronze for more than a couple of games because the inner MMR system quickly detects that they don't belong there and they're going to start gaining giant chunks at a time. It's very difficult. You got to understand that a player that just pops off in one game could completely feed the next, and you have probably done so yourself and have been accused of being a Smurf in the past, even though you're not consistent enough to climb out of bronze. Now, unfortunately, the hard reality of bronze is that there's a certain amount of non-games that just make it feel unplayable. Unfortunately, because of throwers, people leaving, not giving, or just overall the games, how they play out when there's a big skill discrepancy that can happen in bronze. There are games that just are auto losses or auto wins, and it can make bronze feel like pretty RNG when you're trying to improve. I would suggest working on individual performance, and honestly, sometimes you have to play incorrectly to thrive in a place like bronze. What I mean by that is, yeah, if you watch Overwatch League or the high level play, Grandmaster games, people aren't going to be flanking hog 24/7, but in a game where you need to prioritize your individual impact, playing a flank hog is a perfect way to put the game on your shoulders and get a lot of impact in that game and win it, even if as you climb you need to slowly get rid of this type of playstyle, because while it works in bronze, it might not work as you climb, unfortunately. Now next up, we got to talk about silver, which I couldn't think of an analogy for, but honestly there are a lot of patterns that you can identify in silver. Repeated play patterns where people will go through the same thing. They'll do the exact same thing they did in the previous game. They'll lose a game to something and they won't adapt towards the next game. Another big commonality with silver players is they like to think very, let's say, rock, paper, scissors-esque about the game. Very simple things like, hey, Reaper counters X, or this character counters this character. A very basic level understanding of the game that they apply too much to a rank that really macro understanding doesn't really impact the game overall. It's more about individual play more than anything else, when there's very little team play that is actually in the silver rank at all. Over anything, the biggest way to characterize silver is poor mechanical skill. And with mechanical skill alone, you can rank yourself out of the silver rank. And for those of you who are trying to outthink your way out of the silver rank or get your teammates to work together to climb out of the silver rank, this is a very poor way to go about it, in my personal opinion. And you can learn all you want about the game or attempt to, but there are tons of people coming from other games that have no idea anything about Overwatch and climbing to gold or even plat just based on their above average mechanical skill. So that should tell you something very apparent about how important it is. Next up, we got to talk about the gold rank. Gold is like supposed to be a precious metal, right? But there's nothing precious about gold. This is incredibly frustrating of a rank. As someone who started in gold when I played in console, I know exactly what it's like. Now, here's the thing about gold when looking back at VOD reviews and really analyzing the rank. Typically, people know what to do. Tanks know that they're supposed to take space. DPS know they're supposed to try to get picks and pressure off enemies. And healers know they're supposed to heal. But while they know what they're supposed to do kind of on paper, or if the game is paused or if you ask them, their executions are way off. Slow timing, very low predicting, and improper setups. What I mean by that is very poor positioning, whether or not you think about where you should be playing before you actually are fighting the enemy. There's gonna be really simple things like routing to the high ground before a fight gets started on a hit scan so that you have a better angle at challenging the enemy. Or as a tank, pushing up to take all the free space instead of just pushing the cart with 3 persons on it. Another layer to this is just understanding what the enemy is likely to do. The enemy has a Doomfist, maybe you should be keeping an eye to peel for your supports. These are really important things that if you don't do, you're really losing a lot of games that if you just made slightly different decisions in between the fights, not even in the fight itself, you would actually have won these rounds over and over again and overall ranked up. Now, before we move on to the plat, I gotta be honest with you, this is actually only one part of this video series, where the second part's on the website where we cover one mistake for every rank. So if you really want to climb, you gotta go check that out down below. But let's get back into the content. Next up, we got to talk about the plat rank, which I think is the most toxic rank in all of Overwatch. The problem is there is a certain amount of expectations that get built when you climb to the plat rank, and there are constantly people that are not reaching these quote-unquote expectations. So when there's that disconnect, everyone just becomes extremely toxic. Someone sees a Pharah and they expect you to two-tap it out of the sky. Your DPS is tanking on the front line and they expect you to be able to consistently heal them non-stop. A tank pushes in and just goes psycho. They want to get double pocketed and get bubbled and everything in between. A very toxic rank full of these expectations, but one of the things that could definitely hold you back is letting the mindset of this rank and the toxicity really get to you. You're going to be often in situations where people will just throw out blame to you when it doesn't make any sense that that's the case. Sure, they might be right or wrong, but that doesn't matter. What you should be doing is worrying about yourself from your own point of view. Be hypercritical of yourself, but don't be overly hard on things that you mess up. Just identify it and try to work on it in the future. Another huge thing about plat is being overly connected to team compositions or being conjoined at the hip with the idea that you have to play in a very specific way or you need very specific things to win the game. This is not the case at all, and for people that often yell out things like, we need a McCree, or we can't possibly win, or why aren't you playing Ryan? He's the best character in the game. These general statements actually just hold you down and prevent you from thinking about the ways that you can impact the game and you can make plays rather than thinking about the game at a macro level where it still doesn't really matter that much at the end of the day. And there's only so much that you can control about what your team's doing in the first place. Don't let the mindset and the toxicity of the rank get to you. Now, next up, we got to talk about the diamond rank, which just like real diamonds are not worth anything, legitimately or not intrinsically valuable at all. Please don't tell my wife. Now, a lot of people in the diamond rank will have a base of many different things. They'll have a good foundation with mechanical skill, decent positioning, and pretty good understanding of the game or have a fair amount of game sense. Now, that being said, you have a base for these things. There's always more room to grow, and I would highly suggest identifying which of these three categories you lack at the most and doing things to improve at every single day in these categories. Now, one of the things that you really need to learn how to do in the diamond rank is learn how to quote-unquote lose or play off your teammates. One of the best things that you could do is actually think about your team as tools to accomplish a goal. Figure out what you have and what you don't have. A perfect example of this or analogy of this would be like if you're trying to build a boat, right? But you have like a cracked engine, you have like paper and duct tape. You're gonna build a very different design depending on what you actually have to build said boat. And that means there's not one size fits all for any given design you're trying to create because your tools are different, right? Well, how you play a game should be very different depending on the tools that you have. And you think about your teammates as said tools. What kind of DPS do you have first off, and how good are your DPS? What can you rely on them to do? How good are your tanks? What kind of tanks do you have? What can you rely on them to do? This is gonna help you develop a game plan where you can actually break through with your strengths while trying to also minimize your weaknesses. You can't just do the exact same thing with every single 5 teammates that you get in every single game because not every single 5 teammates are going to be the same. And the faster that you can identify the strengths and weaknesses of those 5 people, the better off you're going to be and the better you're going to be able to enable or use / play off your teammates for that dub. Then next up, we got to talk about the Masters rank, more like Masters of feeding. No, I'm just kidding. But all joking aside, the big thing with Masters players that they need to work on the most is consistency. How do you perform in your worst game? This is something that is very difficult to quantify because there are going to be a lot of games where people have, and this can apply to every rank if I'm being honest, where they'll pop off in one game, just completely slaughter the enemy, everything goes perfect, and they are legitimately playing out of their damn mind. And then they'll have another game where things don't go well, they have really poor stats and they just can't seem to make anything happen, and they just say, hey, I had trash teammates in the game that I didn't do well, and I, popped off and carried in the game that I did. Well, guess what? There's a lot of different things that you need to understand. You might have had better enablers, better supports, better DPS, better tanks, and the truth of the matter is you need to ask yourself, how do you create wins in games that are close? What are the games where if you would have performed slightly better, you would have actually won that game? Identify when the moments are where if you would have played them better or made a different decision, that is something that could have turned a team fight and potentially led to you holding a point, winning a game, and getting that sweet, sweet SR. If you can identify these games where you are not performing in those worst games, or you're not identifying those win condition scenarios, working on those is going to be the key to consistency, not just over harping on the games that you just consistently pop off in, because everyone has those pop off games, but it's about the low times and what you do in those low times. Now, the last thing we got to talk about is the Grandmaster rank, and here's the big thing that you got to do. You got to eradicate your errors. This is something that is very important in Grandmaster. It's going through perfect neutral play, doing your job to that neutral point perfectly, right? You're spamming appropriately, you're healing, you're keeping your team, up, you're taking space appropriately. This is what I would call neutral play, where the teams are going through the motion, doing what they're supposed to do, but no one is actually making a play. Now, what you need to do above that, because that's just errorless gameplay, but you're not making any plays, is spotting moments to create plays that can actually affect team fights and then actually pulling them off. You need to try to see these moments, and I'm not talking about just seeing the moments. Like, yeah, you could see a moment where like, hey, there's a support, I'm just gonna dash her as Genji and hope it works out, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about seeing the moments where you can make a play and not get punished for it, that it's gonna have impact, and then actually pulling these plays off in between perfect neutral play. This is ultimately one of the things that can really define a high-level player, and why they consistently have these very key defining team fight winning moments when you're watching streamers or top 500 players or whatever. They're not just dashing randomly, or they're not just triple blinking at someone or jumping on top of someone and hoping it works out. They know, or they can see the scenario where they can get a play off without being punished, and they know what needs to happen for that to be apparent. They're not just going for these plays out of nowhere. They're waiting and looking for these opportunities, and they're capitalizing on them, and in all the moments in between, they're defaulting to that perfect mistakeless neutral play. But if you have any questions about that, definitely let me know in the comments down below, and to see the second part of this video, you got to go to the GameLeap website down below. But thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video. I love your faces, and I'll see you next time.